All right, so this video is a little different than I normally make them, but it's because the Texas Blue Bonnet curriculum was announced just a couple of days ago, and I wanted to make a video about this because I'm here in Texas. I'm in San Antonio, and I went to school K through 12 here, and it looks like the Texas officials signal support for adding Bible lessons for K through 5 classes as some states push Christianity in public schools. Another one says Texas education officials approve optional school curriculum that incorporates Bible lessons, some say is unconstitutional. And so I had to go through this list and I had to figure out exactly what it was saying because this is huge, right? Like this, Texas is allowing the schools, right? And it was an 8-7 decision. So 15 people, right? This school board approved, right? 8 out of 15 state school board members voted Tuesday to keep the Bluebonnet Learning curriculum on a list of K through 5 reading and English language arts materials that could be used for this upcoming school year. Adopting the optional Texas Education Agency developed open education resource can earn schools $40 per school annually. I've also heard $60 in a couple of other articles, so it looks like there's a little bit of confusion over that. But they've essentially created a financial incentive for these teachers to start implementing Bible-based school lessons. So I had to figure out exactly what it was that they were going to be allowed to teach because that's really important. So last year, Texas allowed public schools to hire uncertified religious chaplains as counselors, and the legislature has pushed to require public school classrooms to display the Ten Commandments. Under Texas's proposed revised curriculum, a kindergarten lesson about the Golden Rule, for instance, would prompt instructors to teach students about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount from the Bible's New Testament. The teacher guide for that lesson also mentions Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and other faiths. A first grade unit on sharing stories would teach the parable of the prodigal son from the Bible's New Testament. So a first grade unit on sharing stories would teach the parable of the prodigal son from the Bible's New Testament. The third grade unit on ancient Rome would feature a section dedicated to the life of Jesus and Christianity in the Roman Empire. And a poetry unit for fifth graders would include Psalms from the Old Testament taught alongside poems from Robert Frost and William Carlos Williams. No other texts from religious books would be included in the unit. The proposed materials violate the separation of church and state and the academic freedom of our classroom, but also the sanctity of the teaching profession, said Texas AFT, a union that represents over 60,000 public school educators and support staff across the state. I have so much to say about this because at the very baseline, we must maintain separation of church and state. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that figures like Jesus and Muhammad and Siddhartha and all of these great religious thinkers, they came onto the scene during the Axial Age and later into the Middle Age, but kind of this transitional period where people started asking the big questions about life and about society and even about money. So what's really interesting about this period of time called the Axial Age is that there are so many wars and atrocities happening at that time, right? There's a lot of bloodshed during this period. And so all of these religious thinkers, all these great thinkers of the time are commenting on what is happening in the world. And they're trying to come up with rules about how to treat one another and how we should govern each other and how debt and taxes should work. Well, I guess we are drinking the Kool-Aid of all those things that they were doing back then, thousands of years ago, because that was the first time that we ever had like widespread social and religious debates that led to a lot of the intellectual paradigms that we have today. And so I don't care that they bring Christianity into the school. Me personally, I don't mind. I think that the Old Testament should be removed because it's a bloody mess and doesn't have a lot about like good living necessarily in there. I know that we have the Psalms that are written, but at the end of the day, like what they're trying to do is focus on the good parts of what Jesus taught, which there's a ton of those things. But if you look at all these other religions, there are multiple like positive things that we could get from the other teachers. What's important though is that these concepts be taught in the spirit that they were given with absolutely no specific religious undertones. I don't want a Lutheran's perspective. I don't want a Catholic's perspective. I don't want a Mormon's perspective on the Bible. I want the story that was being told, and I want the cultural and anthropological context of why it was being told. For instance, Jesus talks about the parable of the rich man and his servant and the debtor, right? And in that story, right, he owes him 10,000 talents, which is like $1 billion in that time. And so the servant comes to the master and the master says, "Hey, you got to pay." And the servant says, "Hey, just give me a couple days, right? Give me till tomorrow." It's a joke, right? Just give me till tomorrow and I'll pay you $1 billion. Then the servant goes out and he finds his underservant and beats him for a small debt, just a couple $100 maybe. And so Jesus was telling a joke in that sense. He was commenting on the infinite forgiveness of, of God and that and how it's important for us to forgive, people in our lives because God has forgiven us of all of our debts. But if that is taught as, oh, like God is so great, right? So we have to give it up to him and praise him, then that's the wrong way to teach it. So contextually, it's just incorrect. How it should be taught is there is this guy named Jesus who was telling these jokes, right? Who was giving these sermons back in the day, and he was commenting about the social, the geopolitical like infrastructure of the day. And he often spoke in parables. So it's important for you in a third grade ancient Rome text to understand that, yeah, like there was this guy named Jesus at the time, but also halfway across the world, like the ideas of Confucianism and stuff were being adopted and born and revolutionized, and there was lots of new crossing over of Hindu Buddhist concepts, right? So there was this great like interest in the spiritual and in societal interactions. If we can introduce all of the texts into the curriculum, if we can make religious education a part of the conversation, then ultimately the kids are going to be better educated coming into the world. And so they're going to realize by the time that they graduate that they've been exposed now to 15 different religions, right? We've hit on Jainism, right? Every kid, I think, should learn about Jainism. Every kid, I think, should learn about Hinduism. We should teach Confucian ideals. And most of these organizations, most of these religious beliefs, they have a version of the golden rule or a version of the flood myth, right? They even talk about the flood happened. They all have poetry, right? If you read the Hindu Vedas, the Vedic scriptures, or you read the Bhagavad Gita, or you read the Nag Hammadi, all of these stories, right? They teach about things that are incredibly important, and they focus on these central religious figures that are asking the great questions of our civilization, how we should treat each other and how we should govern ourselves. If we're going to go half in, then number one, we need to remove the financial incentive right away. There should be no financial incentive to add a Christian sub lesson curriculum to the school. Absolutely unacceptable. But if we're opening up the conversation about whether or not we should bring the conversation of religion into public schools, I think it would be foolish for us to say, "Oh no, let's censor, 2,500 years of religious texts from our kindergarten and middle school and high school students." It doesn't make any sense, right? Let's educate them on what's out there. I had a religion class while I was at Brigham Young University, and it's a Mormon school. It's literally a Mormon-owned institution. But they taught all of they taught the they taught the anthropological facts of the religion. They taught the beliefs of the religion, and they allowed us to create our own expositions on it, to write about it, and to comment on it, and to position it next to our own personal beliefs. And so long as we allow our kids to do those things, then we are going to be in a good spot. I do think, though, that there are higher priority things on the schedule that we should talk about. And so rather than like incorporating all of the religious texts into school, we need to start bringing more nuanced, value-driven, principle type books into school, like the 48 Rules of Power or Atomic Habits or The Go-Giver, right? These are business books that teach principles of how to operate things efficiently and how to use your energy to get the things that you want in this life. I would much prefer to have those texts on the shelves for our curriculum for our kids than the Sermon on the Mount. Because while the Sermon on the Mount is great and it's helped a lot of people, it's like a 3 out of 10. I don't think, I definitely would have rather listened to it as a student and disciple of Jesus at the time rather than reading it retold and retranslated, half a dozen times over the last, 2000 years. This is going to be an ongoing debate. My vote is to keep it in. My vote is to bring it all in, bring all the scriptures in, bring the Quran in, have them on every single shelf. Do not censor it from these kids, but focus on things that are actually going to help them in their lives. Focus on teaching them the things that are going to get them ahead, that are going to teach them how to treat other people more, not as objects, right? Or even as like children of God. Don't teach them that. Teach them about how society works and how society has evolved and why these books exist and why religion came about in the first place. I don't think that our educators are prepared to teach that kind of intense curriculum, and I think that they should probably stick to the basics and let's get kids through the process and teach them how to learn. But if we're going to shake up the entire curriculum with something new, then there are a lot better ways for us to do that.